Hey guys, I'm Wally from Impulse Labs, and we are here today demoing the Impulse Cooktop. The Impulse Cooktop is the most powerful and precise consumer cooktop ever made, and it is the only battery integrated appliance on the market today with UL certification that is safe and legal to install anywhere in the United States. So why do we build the Impulse Cooktop? This is really a story about electrification and our mission to help bring more power to your kitchen in a safe way that benefits the climate. We started with a stove because consumers have told us repeatedly that having a gas stove was the last great barrier to electrifying their home. People are used to electric cars now. They're comfortable buying electric heat pumps to heat and cool their home, but they think that there's something better about a gas stove. Specifically, they gave us 3 reasons. 1, they thought it would be expensive to rewire their house or upgrade their electrical panel if they wanted to switch to induction. If you're in an older house, you might not have a 240 volt outlet by your cooking area. And even if you do, if you're in an older house before, say, 1990, you might need to upgrade your electrical panel for it to work with a standard induction stove. The second reason people told us for why they didn't want to switch from gas is they believe that gas is more powerful than electric stoves they've used. And this is true if you're comparing it to electric radiant heat or electric coil, or even some existing induction. This is a belief that's so ingrained in our culture that it's part of our language. Now we're cooking with gas. That's how deep this goes. And then the third reason people told us is that they thought gas was more precise than electric. They like the turn of the knob dialing up and down the flame. And maybe they've used other induction stoves in the past where there's just between 10 and 20 power levels. With Impulse, we have taken on all 3 of these claims and delivered something that is cheaper to install than any other induction stove on the market, more powerful than any stove on the market, full stop, gas or electric, and more precise than any stove that is on the market, full stop. Those 3 reasons are going to guide the rest of this demo here. So let's start with 1 and talk about the form factor. This is a 30-inch induction cooktop. Below the surface, it drops about 6.5 inches beneath the counter level. You can see that it doesn't look like other induction stoves or radiant electric stoves that you've seen before. It's not a solid sheet of black glass. That is because we've built something that is quite a lot better than other induction, and we wanted it to look different. That's one reason, and there's also performance reasons, which we'll go through here. The first thing that's going to jump out and be different is the raised burners. There's 4 9-inch induction burners on the Impulse stove, and they're raised about a 1/2 inch above the stove surface. There's a couple reasons we did this. The first is by raising the burner up, it saves a little bit of room under the counter. And right now our battery hangs, like I said, 6.5 inches below the counter, and we wanted to make that as compact as we could and not push it down further, reducing your storage. The second reason we raised the burner is because we're able to give some of the visual feedback that people like to have when they are cooking on gas. People are used to the flame being small or getting bigger and giving them a visual feedback on heat. We have LED rings that surround the burner and that go from a light yellow, like you see here, to a dark red, which you'll see later once we start actually cooking on the burner. The third reason we raise the burner, because it helps protect both the screen in the middle and give you more versatility on a smaller cooktop. This is 30 inches. Say you're putting multiple large pans on and you need to kind of move one off to the side to make everything fit. If you're doing a flush mount installation, which a lot of people like because it's the stylish thing, and you're pushing one of your pans off to the side, that pan might hit the countertop. But with the raised burner, we don't do that. And you can, as long as you are covering the temperature sensor, it's going to work. The other reason is because raising the burner allows us to protect the screen a little bit. So obviously there's a big screen here in the middle. This is not a touch screen, it's just a display. And we've obviously done tons of drop tests, scratch tests, etc. on it. It's a very durable screen. That being said, durable does not mean it is impervious to damage. So by raising the burner up a little bit, it helps prevent you from, say, dragging a heavy cast iron pot directly across it. Gives you just a little bit more protection there. Moving away from the screen and the burners, the next thing that really stands out on the Impulse Cooktop is the knobs. Most other induction stoves on the market in the United States today get their parts from the same supplier. The fancy stainless steel and the logo might be different, but a lot of the internals are going to be very, very similar, if not exactly the same. And one of the things we heard that customers hate about existing induction is the touch screens. The touch screens and the buttons. They didn't like having to jam a button 15 times to get to their desired temperature. They didn't like touch screens that got greasy and became unresponsive. So what we did is we developed these removable magnetic knobs. They look and feel just like a stereo knob on an old stereo receiver. And that's how you interact with them too. There's no electronics in here, no Bluetooth. It's just, it works off magnets in the knob and then corresponding magnets under the cooktop surface. There's two gestures you can make with this. It's like there's a click or there is a rotate. So using the cooktop then, you're going to interact with it the same way that you did with the original iPods. You can click to turn a burner on, click again to switch to temperature mode, and then rotate to set your preferred temperature or power level. Lifting the knob off turns off the burner instantly. It's a very quick way that I tend to use to power down a burner, or you can also power down a burner by turning the knob all the way to the left and leaving it. A couple of things that the knobs give you. One, it is super easy to clean. There's no, removing the knob and trying to get the grease out from around the stalk like you have on a traditional stove. And then the second thing is there's actually a little bit of a peace of mind safety thing for, potentially for families where you can't turn on the burner if there's no knob there. So you can place the knobs out of reach of little hands and no one can accidentally start cooking something. The knobs are interchangeable. Like I said, it's entirely magnetic. There's no Bluetooth or anything like that. You don't have to charge them. They're very cool. And honestly, we get requests all the time for if we could make them available on other stoves because people are that excited about them over the status quo. Next thing we'll notice is the screen. There's a screen in the middle. It is not a touch screen. Like I said, you're going to interact with it like you did with an original iPod. You push and hold to get into the settings menu. You scroll up and down. You can do things like change the cooking unit from Fahrenheit to Celsius, change the Wi-Fi, or if there is a over-the-air update available, you can trigger that to download. And that's a good segue into a lot of what you don't see here, which is the engineers at Impulse have done a tremendous amount of work to future-proof the hardware of this device as much as possible. There are tons of components in here that we do not use right now, but they are going to enable new features that we plan to use in the future. So you heard me mention an OTA update. You do connect the Impulse to Wi-Fi. That's not because it's a smart home device. You don't have to download an iOS app or anything like that to use it. You control the cooktop directly from the cooktop like you would with any home appliance. However, this is the only appliance available on the market right now that can get performance improving upgrades via software update, just like your phone or your car does. So that is really exciting for us here at Impulse. In the last 3 weeks alone, we have released 3 updates to improve performance, improve temperature sensing, and address other customer feedback. In the future, we're going to be releasing big new feature sets that build on what's already here, ensure that your cooktop continues to get better over time. In terms of future-proofing, I mentioned that there is a Wi-Fi modem in here. There's also a Bluetooth receiver. We don't use that right now, but we can in the future. It could enable all kinds of things, be it from automatic hood integrations to wireless temperature probes. There's also a speaker in the cooktop. Again, we don't use it, but I've seen demos around the office showing off very cool ideas for how we could, such as haptic feedback and knobs and things like that. We designed the Impulse cooktop around a battery, and that battery is what allows us to overcome the first objection that people had to switching from gas to induction. They thought it would be expensive to rewire their house. We put all of our own power control components and our own bidirectional inverter and battery into the cooktop. And what that allows you to do is plug it in to any outlet. 120 volt, 240 volt, doesn't matter. The cooktop is going to perform exactly the same. And that's because you're always cooking off the battery. So you're just plugged into the wall to slowly drip charge it over time. Let's talk power. So one of the cool things about the fact that we are drawing energy off the battery is that we are not limited by the amount of power that is coming through the wall or coming through the gas line in the way that every other cooktop on the market is. We can store a tremendous amount of energy and surge it to the burner over a short period of time to deliver unprecedented performance. This is a liter of water. It is room temp, 71, 72 degrees. Put my hand in there, yep. I'm gonna put this in, 1 liter, 4 cups, into this pan. Most cooktops on the market, say you have a Viking gas stove at home, 15,000 BTU, that's gonna put out somewhere in the neighborhood of 3 to 3.5 kilowatts of power equivalent. I say somewhere between because with gas stoves, 50% of all the energy, 50 to 60% of all the energy you're using is getting, is disappearing into your kitchen in the form of emissions. So with induction, you obviously don't have that. You're transferring the vast majority of the energy directly to the pan. But that being said, your Viking gas stove, you can think of it as 3.5 kilowatts. Top of the line, other induction stoves on the market, the ones that say they have like a power boost, power boil mode or something like that, you might be getting in the neighborhood of 4.5 kilowatts. Again, those stoves are limited by the wire coming into the house and how much power is available through the panel. Impulse, regardless of if you have it plugged in to a garden variety extension cord or you have it hardwired on a dedicated 240 volt circuit, it's gonna perform the same and you're gonna be able to deploy 3 times more energy as anything else. We can drop 10 kilowatts of power into the burner. This was a liter of room temperature water. I'm going to go ahead and put this in, click once, turn on the burner, put it into power mode, and I'm gonna drop 10 kilowatts of energy in. We're gonna start the clock here, but you can see it is already reacting, it is already starting to simmer. It should take, for a liter of room temperature water, somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 to 40 seconds before we are at a roaring boil. So we'll see how we do. Now, you may have noticed this blue line went down a little bit. That's because the pan was heating up so quickly that as a safety precaution, it throttled back the amount of energy a little bit, and now it's creeping back up. But you can see we are now simmering at 30 seconds. And we've got a boil at 40. And you'll see this is a roaring boil. The Impulse cooktop can put out boils that are a lot more dramatic than literally anything you can get on your stove at home. So I'm gonna go ahead and lift the knob off, powers down the burner. And you can see just how crazy responsive this is. I'm gonna shoot it up, boiling, dial it back a little bit, instantly the power tapers off. Dial it back, shoot it back up, boiling, down, tapers off. So this is way, way, way more responsive than radiant electric, where you would just be waiting for the burner to cool down. It's also more responsive than other induction, where you would have to be fumbling through a menu or pushing buttons to get it to scale down. With the knob, you can turn from 10 kilowatts to 50 watts in the turn of a hand, and the stove responds instantly. Okay, so 1 liter, that's if you're making tea, something like that. We can now boil water on an American cooktop faster than the 240 volt British kettles that the British are always proud of. But what if I wanted to make pasta? What I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna drop 10 cups of water into this pan. Again, this is room temperature. So that is 8. And let me get 2 more here. 8, 9, 10. So here's 10 cups of cold water, or room temperature water. And again, I'm going to turn the power up to 10 kilowatts. We'll start the clock here. This should boil in about 1 minute and 30 seconds. I don't know about you, but I have a gas Samsung stove at home, and it takes 10 to 12 minutes to boil enough water for pasta. And quite frankly, half the time it takes more than that because I've got so bored waiting for it that I've walked out of the room, got distracted, come back, I've evaporated half the pot, and I need to start the whole process over again. With Impulse, you're gonna see we're at 30 seconds. It's already bubbling like crazy, gonna be simmering in a moment, and we're gonna be boiling in no time here at all. Now, people ask me, well, okay, it's a fun party trick, but what is What is boiling water that fast actually good for? Well, one, it does cut down on your cooking time, but two, it also gives you a lot more control over your cooking. So imagine I'm making pasta here. Say I'm making ravioli. When this gets up to a boil, you throw ravioli in, all of a sudden the temperature of the water goes down. It takes 3-4 minutes before it's back up to power again. With impulse, that's not going to happen. I can just dial it back up and instantly, or essentially instantly, have that water already boiling again, because I can put in 4 times the power, 3-4 times the power of any other stove on the market. So you're having way more control over boiling liquids. Minute 22 seconds, we got a boiling pot. And again, a wild, wild boil. You know, if say I'm making soup, I need to bring my water up to a boil here. And then I want to simmer it. I need to hold it for 20, 30 minutes. When I'm cooking in power mode on the Impulse Cooktop, you can dial in exactly the level of simmer you want and hold it there. You're not going to worry that the pan is getting warmer or cooler in the background. If I leave it at 1.9 kilowatts here like this, I could leave it there until all that water simmers off, and it's going to hold at exactly that degree of simmer. If I want it a little bit more vigorous, boom, move it up to 3, and I'm going to have exactly, I'm going to be able to hold exactly that degree of simmer as long as I want. It is really transformational for making things like, like stews or soups where you need to hold simmers for prolonged periods of time. When we first started dropping 10 kilowatts into pans, the first thing that happened is we ruined a lot of pans. So the team went out and realized that we needed to have the best temperature sensing technology in the market in order to control that degree of power. You know, a fast car needs good brakes. So we went out and we bought all of the temperature sensing products that exist. There's not a ton of them, but there's a handful. We brought them to the lab, we broke them down, we tried to see, okay, would this work for impulse? And the answer was no. Nothing was responsive enough. We could not settle for temperature sensing that was taking a reading once every few seconds. We needed to do it many, many times per second. So the team developed our own active temperature sensing technology. The most visible part of this is the sensor that pops up from the middle of the burner. This pushes up and down and makes contact with the bottom of the pan. There's also additional sensors under the glass that are part of the feature. And then obviously a lot of the secret sauce is in the software that's running under the hood. But what I want to demonstrate now is just how fast temperature sensing is taking a reading. So what I've put on here, this is an experimental project. We're trying to make a good wok ring. One of the great frustrations for wok cookers is that cooking on a regular stovetop can be frustrating. Most common, you can't get a flat bottom, but also on no other stove on the market, unless it's like a specialty like propane wok burner, can you get temperatures hot enough. You just saw me boil 10 cups of water in a minute 30 seconds. We can get the temperature hot enough for proper wok cooking. But then the other issue that people run into on induction stoves in particular is that most induction stoves, when you move the pan around or lift it up, the burner shuts off. And they all behave that way because, again, they're all using the same internal components. We designed our components all from the ground up. So we give you 30, 35 seconds before the burner turns off if you remove a pan from it. That allows you to do things like wok cooking, where you might be lifting the pan up to toss ingredients and such. But what I want to show you here is how responsive the temperature sensing is. So I've placed the wok on the burner, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the temperature to about 230 degrees. So that requires touching the button twice. First click goes into power mode, the second click switches to temperature mode. And what you're going to see is a big white number that I'm setting to 230. I'm setting this deliberately above boiling. So the big white number is my target. The yellow line that is going up and then turning orange is the measured temperature. Once we're within about 10 degrees of the target, we'll display an exact temperature reading. Before then, the temperature's changing a little too fast for that information to be useful for cooks. As soon as it gets up to 230 or so, I'm going to pour like a half cup of water in here, and you're going to see that line, the orange line, the measured temperature, drop like a rock by about 75 degrees, and it's going to do so almost instantly. That's how fast we're measuring temp. So I've just poured a tiny bit of water in and boom, that line is shooting down. That is how many times per second we are taking the temperature sense. And now you can see it's boiling. Because what has happened is the cooktop has realized, oh crap, the temperature has fallen dramatically. I need to surge more power to the burner to return it to that target. So obviously I have set the target here above the boiling point of water. So since I poured water in, it is not going to get there until it all evaporates off. I did that just because I wanted to show you, I wanted to show you the temperature falling down, the stove reacting, surging energy to the burner in an attempt to return to the set point. That's sort of a little illustration of how the temperature sensing works. What we are trying to do, roughly speaking, is get you to your target temp as fast as reasonably possible without going over too much. Going over a lot is how you burn something. You know, there's a little bit of an inherent trade-off between how quickly we reach the target temperature and the odds of overshooting. And that's something that we can actually improve and iterate on behind the scenes. That's one of those OTA updates. I think that demonstration kind of shows you a little bit of what we're going for. So you can cook in temperature mode, but what does that mean? You know, power boil is awesome. The ability to install this cooktop on a 120 volt outlet, any old plug, is amazing. Saves you tons of money. You don't have to rewire your house. The knobs are super cool. People want them as fidget spinners and they want them on their other stoves that aren't Impulse branded. But I think the real secret sauce, the real amazing feature of the Impulse cooktop is this temperature sensing. It is because it makes so much in cooking more precise and easier, and it allows people who are bad cooks like me to pull off great, reliable results time after time without worrying about burning their food. What are some things you can do with temperature sensing? One, you can cook bacon or something like that without ever burning it. And I'm going to do that in a minute for you. How? It is because you are setting the temperature below the smoke point. If you know the pan's never going to hit the smoke point of bacon, which is probably around like 350, 360 degrees, you can cook it there all afternoon and it's never going to burn. Try putting your pan on medium on your stove at home, throwing 3 slices of bacon on and leaving the room. You're gonna set the fire alarm off. Second thing you do, you can cook the perfect egg every single time. I'm gonna do that in a minute for you too. There's all kinds of confectionery things you can do. You can temper chocolate. You can caramelize sugar super easily because you don't need a double boiler for it. You don't need to be fussing with the pan in order to make sure it doesn't get too hot. The stove is doing that work for you. If you wanted to, if you're worried about seed oils, you can deep fry in olive oil because you can set the temperature above the fry point and below the smoke point of olive oil and be certain that you're not going to overshoot. One of the things we love to do around the office here is, we call it a dry sous vide of a steak, where we get the same effect of sous vide, where it's perfectly cooked through from edge to edge, all at a single temperature, and then a quick sear at the end. But you don't have to wrap your food in plastic and then submerge it in hot water for an hour and a half. You do it on the stove with the lid by just setting the temperature to 140 degrees and letting it cook through for a medium steak. So we're gonna make a little breakfast here. We're gonna do bacon and eggs. So I'm setting the temperature here to 330 for the bacon. We'll let that pan warm up a little bit. Here's the bacon when we're ready. And I'm gonna set this burner to temp mode 315 for the eggs. We have a lot of different words for eggs, over easy, over medium, sunny side up. Once you start cooking with Impulse, you realize that small temperature jumps matter a lot. And you can hone in and figure out exactly what kind of fried egg you like. I like my egg to be cooked 315 for 2 minutes on one side, flipped for 30 seconds on the other. It's gonna give me a nice runny yolk with a light brown crisping on the bottom. If I want a super fluffy egg, without flipping it, with a nice preserved yolk, you would put a lid on it and steam it. Cook it maybe 3 minutes at 315. What's cool is, however you like your egg, you're gonna be able to pull that off on any pan. Because it doesn't matter how this pan interacts with, medium on your stove, the stove is doing the work for you. If I put a heavier pan that's maybe a little slower to heat, it's still just gonna heat to 315. It's gonna be the same temperature. I don't need to worry about fiddling with it or adjusting it. The stove's doing that work for me, and I can reproduce it with high confidence every single time. So I'm gonna drop this bacon on. We're gonna see a little bit of steam because we are evaporating some water, and I'm gonna cook this for about 7 minutes. It's gonna be crispy bacon at the end. I know not everyone likes crispy bacon, but what I want to show you is that I'm not going to burn anything. The fat's going to reduce. It's going to steam a little bit as the water evaporates, You're not gonna get any smoke. And I can leave it there all afternoon. Meanwhile, we've got this pan up to temp, 315. I'm gonna kind of pretend I'm in college here and manhandle this butter. Put a little bit of butter on the pan to help with the browning. Set that aside. I'm gonna start this egg timer. One of the features, we talked about the OTA updates. One of the features the team's working on that I'm most excited about is a built-in timer in the cooktop itself. Then I don't have to carry the egg timer around. Okay, so I'm gonna crack an egg. Like I mentioned, I'm a bad cook, so we got 2 little pieces of shell in there. While we let that cook, you know, one of the fun things about cooking with temperature is we're able to give a lot more precision to recipes that right now are ambiguous, you know? Cook 20 to 30 minutes at medium, medium, low. Like, what does that mean? Well, there is a right answer. We just don't know what it is, and we don't know what it is and don't use much precision because there's so much variance between different stoves. Medium on your stove at home, on your gas stove, is different than medium on mine. It's different if I use a different pan. And quite frankly, it's different one year than it is the next because the nozzles on your stove are maybe they're getting grime, they're getting carbon build up in them. The stove is going to perform differently over time with different pans, so precision isn't possible. And this actually reminds me of the situation with ovens before the 1950s. The first thermostats went into ovens, I believe, in the 1920s, but they weren't really popular until the immediate post-war period. They transformed baking. It went from feel, from knowing your oven, to precise recipes with precise temperatures that could be reproduced by other people. And that's what we're gonna do with cooking on the stove. We're gonna give precision and clarity to stovetop cooking, the same that we have in ovens. I had a gentleman in the other day who told me, you know, the problem with this stove is that cooking's all about feel and you're taking away the feel. I would just note that there's not much demand for ovens that don't have thermometers anymore. You know, once we have the technology, we can focus on other things that make cooking great and rely on the impulse stove and active temperature sensing to keep the pan at the right temp. So I'm gonna flip this egg over. You can see nice light on the bottom, nice light browning. Didn't stick to the pan at all. That's because if you're holding the pan between basically 280 and 330 degrees, a fried egg, even on just a regular stainless steel pan, is not gonna stick at all. So impulse will do that every single time. You can see the bacon is starting to crisp up. When I flip it, we get more steam, but we don't get smoke. All right, so this egg is done. I'm gonna pull it off. Again, flip it over. You see I have a nice runny yolk, nice browning on the bottom, no stick to the pan. And what's amazing about this is I can get this result every single time. I do these demos every week. And the one thing that repeats perfect like clockwork is making the fried egg. It's never going wrong because the stove is doing the work for me, even if I'm a bad cook. You know, I do these demos enough that I was starting to think, oh, I can make like good fried eggs and stuff at home without any trouble. So I was making my wife some bacon, egg, and cheese sandwiches for breakfast the other week. And sure enough, 15 minutes into the process, all the windows are open, there's smoke everywhere, and the fire alarm is going off. It's not that I know what I'm doing. I have a good tool that makes it so I can do a good job every single time, despite not paying too much attention to it. So that is what is super exciting to me about cooking with temperature. I'm gonna let this bacon just continue to crisp up while we go through some of the most common questions that I get during our live demos here in San Francisco. 1, can I use a griddle on the Impulse cooktop? Yes. We would recommend going this way vertically, but we do use griddles in the office here. I recommend right now using the griddle in power mode because you can get a little bit of because you're transferring heat from one burner to the other, it can get a little wacky if you're trying to do temperature mode with the same temperature throughout the entire griddle. But it works perfectly fine. It's great for searing things or for, kind of like running a little, using as a catering station or whatever. We use the made-in griddle, but we also use some stainless steel griddles. What type of pan should we use? Anything that is induction will work. We even give you little knobs that you can check your pan to see if it's magnetic. That being said, we do recommend 3-ply stainless steel for best results. And that is because stainless steel, 3-ply stainless steel, is going to be the most efficient type of pan at transferring heat horizontally through the base of the pan, which makes the temperature sensing technology in the Impulse cooktop more accurate and more responsive. So for best results, use stainless steel. Can I use cast iron? There's a lot of cast iron enthusiasts. Yes, you can use cast iron. However, what we would say is the reason we like to use cast iron in American culture is precisely because cast iron holds a lot of energy in it. So when you do things like flip the egg over, you saw how much even flipping a cooking egg over lowered the pan temp. Cast iron helps mitigate that. But with impulse, you don't need the cast iron because the stove's going to do it for you. The stove is going to surge energy to make sure that you are at your target temp when you're cooking as fast as possible. So while cast iron works, stainless steel works a little bit better. That's what we would generally recommend. I'm going to pull this bacon off now and set it aside, but you can see I've got 3 crispy pieces of bacon there. I've got some browning on the bottom of the pan, but we cooked that whole thing with no burning. Some other facts about pots and pans. We do recommend that you use pans, if possible, that are a solid design. There are sometimes pans where there's like a cooking plate that is bonded to the bottom, and you can see because it won't be a continuous piece of metal. Those work, but they don't work, again, as well with temperature sensing, just because sometimes like the glue that's in between the layers of the pan can throw the sensors off a little bit. What about other form factors? Well, this is a 30-inch cooktop. It will fit in any 30-inch opening. If you are replacing a range top or a range, there are solutions that we can point you to. There are ovens that you can mount under the Impulse cooktop, and there are companies that can help design affordable trim kits to fill in any gaps so you don't have to get new cabinetry if you don't want to. We also sell carts. If you are renting or would like to have your cooktop be mobile, or just maybe you're not ready to redesign your kitchen just yet, we can sell you a cart that you can mount your cooktop in. I've got one at home. It is insanely over-engineered. It can probably hold more weight than my dining room table. Last thing I wanted to flag, we're done, but you'll notice there are still lights on some of these burners. That is indicating even though the stove is off, even though we're not cooking, those burners are above 130 degrees Fahrenheit. That is because we were heating up a pan and then heat transferred from the pan down into the burner. Because it's induction, it will only transfer heat up if it has something magnetic to react to. So, my hand is not magnetic. Nothing is happening even though I'm putting 10 kilowatts in. But heat does transfer from a hot pan down to the burner, and we show that for safety reasons in the LED lights here, as well as the hot burner icon here. Other questions? What happens if the power goes out? Good question. The Impulse cooktop, we believe you can get between 3 and 4 meals on battery power alone if the power goes out. Unlike most gas, you need electricity to turn it on these days. Certainly you can't cook if the power's out with other electric or induction. Impulse, we think you can get about 3 to 4 meals out. Obviously, meals is kind of a hazy term, but what uses the most energy is things like bringing water to boil. Preheating a pan uses energy. Maintaining the pan surface temp does not use a ton of energy. So, when I was making that egg, we were, say, maybe putting a kilowatt in to get the pan up to 315 degrees, and then maybe 150, 200 watts or less to maintain it at 315 degrees. You're going to get a lot of meals in unless you're, say, doing something like running a commercial distillery where you're just constantly boiling water. That's going to use a lot more energy, a lot faster. Cleaning, the last most important question that I get on the Impulse cooktop is how do you clean it? You can just use, regular all-purpose cleaner. If you've been, say, frying a bunch of asparagus and splattering olive oil on, you might want to use a degreaser before your cleaner. It's super easy to clean under the buttons. The buttons are water safe. What about the temperature sensors? Well, the temperature sensors depress, but they're sealed from the top and the bottom. Unless you deliberately drill a hole in here, water is not getting through there. And it is easier to clean, I promise, than it looks. Because you can depress it, you just take a little cloth, you bunch it up, and you wipe out the sensor like that. We use this cooktop every day in the office. We are constantly spilling things on it, constantly doing demos. It cleans up just fine. That is it for our demo today. Again, my name is Wally. I do our demo program here at Impulse Labs. If you have any questions, you can email me directly, wally@impulselabs.com. That is WALLY @impulselabs.com. Thanks, and if you're ever in San Francisco, please join me for a live demo. We also cook ribeyes, chocolate-covered strawberries. There's a tasting, there's an interactive element. It's a lot of fun.